that really is a very strong, loud, even talking about treating obesity, dieting, suggesting that being thinner is even conditionally better than being fatter, is fat shaming. And I use that word conditionally in there on purpose, and somebody will purposefully ignore it and still try to attack me anyway, because that's just how it is. That's how it works. And I am a person who, look, my medical situation is more complicated than this. But last year when the weight loss began, it was because I was essentially, I don't know if it would be exaggerating to say it was killing me. And I was getting now to a point that continuing the life as I had wouldn't have probably been sustainable for much longer, or potentially wouldn't have been existing for much longer. As in, I would imagine that my life, just for example, the sleep apnea, when it was discovered how severe my sleep apnea was, 55 events per hour. I was told that on average, when a person has it that bad, if it continues to go untreated, and it probably had gone untreated at that level for a while, maybe not quite up to 55, but still in the severe category, for at least a couple of years. I know that it was some signs that I had it were relayed to me from partners, even 3, 4 years prior to it. And this was before I had then put on additional weight. But that when your sleep apnea is that bad, if you look at the mortality rates, it's something like on average, people, when it gets into the very severe level, they tend to die of strokes and heart attacks within 6 to 7 years. Your mortality gets just like really, really cut down. And so now that is actually only a piece of everything that happened. And in a weird way, I'm fortunate and unfortunate. My health situation is very unfortunate. My health situation got so bad in a way that I didn't have much choice but to get better in ways related to how my eating habits were so bad, because I was getting so sick now from eating, having these responses from my body. And I at the moment, I'm not going to go into terrible detail. If I can get, I'm thinking about on Jimmy Snow as a podcast, seeing if I can reach out to this guy from the Mayo Clinic who, one of the conditions that I may talk more about is one called bile acid malabsorption. And this was the thing that basically isn't a thing that itself will kill you at all, but in conjunction with everything else that was going on, it becoming really more severe led to a situation where I couldn't really eat much of anything, plus some other autoimmune responses that I was having, and got down to like couldn't eat much and I couldn't eat much things, as in quantity in a day, how much I could consume in a day was dramatically cut. And then what my options to eat was dramatically cut. As you've probably heard me say many times, the number kind of changes. It was for the quite a long period recently, only 3 foods a day, basically chicken breast, potatoes, rice, and white rice, mind you, potatoes at least in a couple of different forms, but not with like seasonings or anything besides salt. And then having to supplement all the other stuff. Well, I'm now up to like 5 foods, though my body's having difficulty adjusting to some supplements and stuff too. I think it's the supplements. It's hard to tell between, but we're adding some more stuff in and messing with some more stuff. And anyway, so much of it was so much worse. When I saw a cardiologist last year, he had the test results from prior to when I saw him. Obviously prior to when I saw him, prior to when like the stuff had all started happening around that same period of time in April when all these dramatic changes happened. And he had like my blood work, which included my lipid panel from before that. Meanwhile, I didn't see this cardiologist until November, I want to say. And so he walked in, first of all, I think surprised to see a person who clearly wasn't the weight that was still on his notes. I had, by that period of time, by then I had already lost 60 or so of the 80 pounds that I've lost. And so he walks in, sees a person who's clearly not 280-ish pounds, 276, I think was my height. 200, but I'm just going to always round 280-ish pounds sitting in front of him. And he's like, oh, okay, these are bad. Like these are bad. And it took you a long time to get here. And I was like, hey, so the good news is here's the paper copies. These are actually my current results. These are as of like a week. And it was basically, he was able to look, he's like, yeah, just so you know, you've essentially communicated to me, you've gone from you shouldn't count on a long life to now certain parts of your health related to again, cardiology, my cholesterol, um, which is obviously made up of multiple numbers, and different things in my metabolic blood panel, they had all improved a lot. And so it was kind of like you're these in a few short months, you have turned things around, and now you actually can count on having a life. And so, all this to say is to kind of open up about my own challenges, my own struggles with health issues. Again, I'm probably never going to share everything. I'm pretty private about stuff. The stuff with the bile acid malabsorption. Part of me wants to do a dedicated video. Again, I'm going to see if I can talk to this guy from the Mayo Clinic, who's done so much of the research. I just have to reach out and try and see if he'd like to talk about it, because I think everybody needs to know about it. Because so many people, if you are diagnosed with IBS-D, that would be D standing for diarrhea, there's like a 25 to 35% chance you don't have IBS, that you actually have this. But IBS is this catch-all where they're like, we don't know. And it's so the version, what I had, type 3, was extremely severe. Most people won't have it to that severity, but it's also like highly manageable. In fact, while I'm still struggling with elements from it, because again, mine's quite severe, the change in managing the specific symptoms that come from bile acid malabsorption, just treating it, have been tremendous, have been ginormous. So by the way, if you have IBS-D, frequent diarrhea, just look it up. Just look up bile acid malabsorption. And if it seems familiar to you, the diagnosis for it is literally so easy. There's a medication, it's called cholestyramine. It can't hurt you because it doesn't absorb in your system at all. It's essentially a resin. You drink it. It's not pleasant. I have to have it many times a day now, but it's not pleasant, and it binds to excess bile. And essentially, if you take it and within a few days you no longer have diarrhea, you had bile acid malabsorption. And so nobody wants to talk about diarrhea. Nobody wants to talk about poop on the internet, but I'm here to sit here and just be like, if you have this thing, I might even isolate this clip for my channel and just be like, if you have diarrhea, please watch this. Please watch. If you've been told you have IBS-D, please watch this thing, because you need to know that bile acid malabsorption exists. It actually is pretty important. But mine, again, the IBS or the stomach stuff, because I haven't, IBS, again, being a catch-all, but I've understood that my intestinal problems and my digestive issues, I wouldn't have put in the brackets of IBS for now over a decade. There's too much other stuff going on with certain organs and certain medical history that have made things worse. And so, but there are still elements of what goes on in my gut, in my body, that aren't fully explained, even with this bile acid malabsorption stuff. That's just been the biggest change. Treating that has been the biggest change of my life. Had I been treated for that back after I had my gallbladder removed, which, by the way, if you've had your gallbladder removed and you have IBS-D, the chances that what you have is bile acid malabsorption has just gone way up. Just so you know, way up. Like, way up. Like, it might almost be weird if your IBS-D isn't actually BAM, as they call it. It would be, I think, I'm not a doctor, but I think if you have specifically IBS-D and no gallbladder, I'm not saying everybody with no gallbladder, but those two, I'm pretty sure it's accurate to say you actually probably have BAM. Anyway, all of this related to my life would have been so different, by the way, if I had been treated for it shortly after I had my gallbladder removed when I was, I think I was 17 or 18, somewhere between 17 and 20, I had my gallbladder removed. I would have had to have been 17 because I remember what job I worked at. And I worked at that job like right up until my 18th birthday. And then very shortly after my 18th birthday, I switched to working at Verizon. Can you hear me now? Where was I? I'm going all over the place because this is a thing I'm thinking. Most of my day is consumed with health stuff. Like, literally, it's my day in, day out what I'm mostly focused on and worrying about and figuring out and navigating. And taking way too many supplements. The ridiculousness of my closet, of my pharmacy closet, essentially. I've got a small pharmacy in my house. None of the good stuff, though, because I refuse painkillers because of my history. Anyway, so no point in breaking in unless you need this resin. They diagnose you by basically taking the resin and seeing if it works. And if it doesn't, you excrete it. It doesn't matter. You'll have some weird yellow stuff in your poo. But if you have bile acid malabsorption, yellow poo already is not going to be all that surprising to you. Again, getting too in. This is all to talk about. Bring it back to the discussion about obesity. I was obese, and that's not a surprise to anybody. I keep looking at pictures of me a year ago, and I have this weird feeling where I'm like, I don't believe in fat shaming, and that any individual, you shouldn't be bullied for being fat, and most people shouldn't be intervening on most other people for being fat. Um, but I got to tell you, I don't know if it would have made a difference. So I don't even know if this feeling I have matters. But I feel like nobody talked to me about from people I love, because people in comment sections, sure, dude, you're getting fatter, and we're like, some people even be nice. I'm worried about how much weight you're putting on. Um, but no one really in my life, though that's fair enough, I guess, because a lot of them know I already struggle with my weight, and it's not like I'm not aware, but I don't know that the habits and the addiction that I was feeding and the way it was hurting my health, for me personally, I don't know how to reconcile the, like, how to avoid fat shaming and the like, um, and being so careful not to fat shame when realizing I think I needed an intervention, like an alcoholic level intervention. As somebody who is, by the way, completely, I haven't touched alcohol, and I've fucked with it for a little bit a few years back. I didn't really ever have a problem with it, but I did a few years back going through a really tough breakup. People might remember because I drank on air, I think once or twice. And I could never drink much because of how sick it would make me and how it would affect pre-existing organ issues. But I have had struggles with other substances and stuff, and as a result have been clean of those substances for, it'd be like 13, 14 years now. And I've been just generally straight edge, as the kids call it. They don't call it that anymore. I think that's what my generation called it. But for a while, I've been not consuming much of anything. I 2 years ago tried to use marijuana each night, to or cannabis, I should say, to get to sleep every night, and it was helpful, but then it was also a problem because my sensitivity shoots through the roof. Or rather, desensitivity shoots through the roof kind of quickly, and the amount I was having to use in the evenings made me have then dopamine sort of withdrawals during the day, meaning I would just feel like crap and like I hated everything until at night when I would use it again. So I had to even stop that. Um, I do though. I've been intervened for really bad habits, really bad addictions, and I think that the level of unhealthy. I understand nobody would have understood to do it because I already was dealing with chronic illness that was severe, that they knew about, and so it would have been easy enough to just be like, no, you guys are all wrong about it being anything to do with this. Because look at me now. I mean, here I am 80 pounds lighter, but my ability to go out and do stuff still isn't necessarily better. It is better, but it's not. I'm not going out and doing stuff still. I'm still not back to where I was a few years ago, where I could spend most days out of the house. I could travel an hour to the other side of Austin to hang out with Matt and Arden, and I don't have that part of my life back, but my day-to-day quality of life and overall just feeling, and the amount of time I'm spending just sick and hating life, way reduced. And a big part of that has been treating the obesity and the bile acid malabsorption. Those two both had to happen. So nobody would have known to intervene. So I'm not necessarily even saying, we just don't, we live in cultures where the extremes are both being so loudly represented. Either you get to just be a giant asshole to fat people, and that's advocated for, or you're not allowed to say a thing. And I think I needed somebody to say a thing, and I ended up having a bodily intervention, luckily before I died, because it wouldn't have been, it may be mostly good fortune that I didn't, because of how bad, like I said, my cholesterol and my blood pressure and everything were really bad. I was in the high risk area for, just a blood clot, a stroke, a heart attack, and the kind of shit that people have every day. But you're way more likely to when you are that unhealthy. And granted, I never broke 300 pounds. There are a lot of people living 300 pounds somehow more active than I was. My body just did not take well to it with all of my other medical issues. And the fact that actually specifically like high fat diets, which I was eating, I have to eat an extremely low fat diet now. My body just can't tolerate almost any amount my body will respond to. So it's more about like, what is the maximum level of response that I can deal with in a day and go about my normal life. And that's what I have to limit myself to. So all of this to say, it's very interesting news to find out that in the wake of these GLP-1 drugs, which I think it is actually a crime or should be a crime. It is immoral that these are not being mass produced, supplemented by the government, just literally like at this point, steal them. Like government, take it from them. I don't care if it financially destroys the 4 people who are becoming billionaires off of this thing. I legitimately am like, if all 4 of them become homeless as a result, that will be a small price to pay against the millions of lives these GLP-1 drugs would save. But right now, getting a GLP-1 prescription in the first place, very hard. And then if you get it, you are looking at a ginormous cost unless your insurance covers it. And your insurance probably only covers it if you have type 2 diabetes, which a lot of people don't. Obesity, regardless of fat shaming and all that stuff, you cannot deny that obesity is killing people. And so we have to be able to talk about that some way without going, you're fat and you're devalued, you're lesser in society, whatever. Of course, that's all true, by the way, that is how people treat you. I am aware already of how much better I am being treated just for now being, I don't know if I'd yet call myself thin. I'm pretty close to thin now though. Like when I stand up straight and I'm maybe sucking my gut a little bit, my stomach comes in behind my rib cage. But I still have love handles and stuff. I could still afford to lose 20 more pounds and I wouldn't be 20 more pounds. I'd start to look like kind of Coke skinny. And trust me, I know that that's what weight I look Coke skinny at. Firsthand, and that is the specific adjective I can use to describe it. Anyway, that's where I would be. But I could afford to lose 20 more pounds or so and be good. It would take a little more than that to get to Coke skinny, really. Probably like 35 more pounds, and then people would be like, is he on the booger sugar? Is that what's going on? Is he using a little snorty fat medication? These GLP-1 drugs would literally save generations of people. And you have people out here who are trying to deregulate the pharmaceutical industry, all while right now, imagine it. Okay, obesity kills more people than cancer. If we knew there was a company who had the cancer drug, but they were only giving it to people who could afford it, and the insurance companies were only giving it to people who would cost them more money if they didn't give it to them, nobody would be, Luigi would have a lot more supporters in that scenario. Okay? That's what I'm saying here. That's the level of unacceptable that would be. Well, guess what? That's happened. Not with cancer, but the thing that's actually killing more people than cancer, which is obesity. And there is a drug that cost them less than $5 to produce that they are charging around $1,500 for. They have gotten way more back than the research and innovation that they have to cover. All of that has been covered. You could cover that 10 times over. I wouldn't, if the government wants to come and say, all right, look, you win $10 billion. The government's taking your patent, taking your facilities, and we're taking it over. And we're just going to distribute it. And it's going to be available with a small consultation with a pharmacist. I would probably still add that step to anybody who wants it to treat specifically obesity and then maintain and everything until better therapeutics come out. So speaking of these better therapeutics, and I know we have to talk about the AI. I said we were going to go short today and we haven't because we've gotten on a topic that I'm very, very passionate about. And so if this does end up as a clip out there, just so you know, this is from our show. The Lion is a podcast. Jimmy Stone has a podcast is coming back featuring conversations with people, topics that I much care more about or people I disagree with, discussions with people who can cover either side of those things. But go follow the Line is a Podcast, where the Line is a Podcast is. Links will be in the description. There are these new treatments that may be developing because there has actually been the discovery of the specific neurons in your brain, or rather right now in mice's brain, but this is where a lot of things start, in the brain of a mouse. The specific neurons that fire that tell your body you're full. And that this could mean a few things. One, potentially that neuron firing could be induced by other drugs. However, that's not the most ideal way you would want to treat this. That's like a short-term thing. But let's be clear. My brain still doesn't have much of an experience of being full. It does a little bit now, mostly because I supplement fiber. I have to. So the fiber supplement kind of fills me up, but it's almost like now, because things have been slowed down, there's not room. But if you were to give me bags of chips, and it didn't make me sick, if you just returned me to, or even did make me sick, but in the way it used to, I'm talking like a family sized bag of chips. I could have easily gone through in an afternoon, and just a constant snacking. My brain definitely doesn't shut that off. And it wants that flavor in the mouth. It wants to feel the textures. It wants to be occupied with all of that. That's just how my brain is. And that's part of this, in talking about it being more like an addiction than it is just a simple, like, I like food and I can't stop, the way people think it is. It's ridiculous what skinny people think being obese is like. They say the dumbest shit. Like, well, you should just decide not to. It's more like an addiction, much, much more like an addiction than it is like you just feel an impulse like, ooh, today I just really want some chocolate chip cookies. These future therapies could include gene therapy, basically targeting those neurons and making them actually operate correctly, to say at an appropriate amount of time, like, no, you're full. Stop eating. It's better for you to stop eating. Because right now, these GLP-1s kind of do something similar. They basically are the hormone that tell you you're full, not the neurons. And so it's sort of artificially coming in there. And I tried the GLP-1 drugs for a short period of time, had a very bad response to them, had to stop. And then what little weight I had lost on them, like 15 pounds or so, I put back on, and then eventually would even be heavier than I had been before. This was all before that peak of none of this was in the last year when you've seen me lose weight. None of them were the GLP-1 drugs. I worry often that the GLP-1 drugs exacerbated the bile acid malabsorption, because it seems like that makes sense because of the symptoms I got, but I can't prove any of that. And I don't know if that's the thing. I'd have to consult with a doctor. That's not an actual medical assessment. It's funny how the symptoms that started that I stopped the GLP-1 drugs kind of persisted and seemed very similar to the symptoms that then got worse. That I had to, anyway, I have no idea whether that was what caused it or not, but I do know what the studies of things look like so far and how they have changed, and that for most people, they are incredible, despite the fact that all medications have side effects. But it would be better if your body could do it and your brain could signal it, and you didn't have this scenario where you are putting in a hormone artificially, your body's becoming dependent on it, because, amongst other things, if you start these GLP-1 drugs, to keep the weight off, you have to stay on them. You can't just take the amount that gets you to lose the weight, because that's all they do is they make you not hungry. Like, that's it. It's just the hormone that makes you go, ooh, I've already eaten. Now, for me, it meant I would eat a little bit, and if I tried to eat more than it, I'd literally throw up. Like, it would make you feel so full, because it would slow your system down so much. So, more ideally would be your brain actually properly does it. And this is the potential of this discovery, these neurons that potentially we could highlight, or rather we could exploit these brain pathways of these neurons and return the regulation of appetite control, which would be incredible. Now, clinical trials, they're supposed to start literally within 2 years. And it would also mean a non-invasive therapy for obesity and new drugs to help suppress appetite. And I just want to say, once again, more than anything, please steal it. Whoever is allowed to do that from the government, please steal. If it succeeds, please take it or buy out at a reasonable price, because that's realistically the most likely thing. Do not Stop letting these companies put huge paywalls on literally living. Everybody I am speaking to, everyone who will hear my voice, whether you know it or not, someone has died that you are connected to. Probably several people have died in connection to complications from obesity, especially if you are in America, especially then. They have either had a shorter life than they would have, or they would have even had a worse life. And you haven't been able to have that person in your life the way you would want to. If you are struggling with obesity, I understand just telling you you have to make changes isn't going to do it. As I said, I'm somewhat lucky in that I got so sick I had no choice. Now I still have the sickness to deal with, and I still have all this shit that I'm dealing with. And it's not fun, and I hope I get to have a life again because I'm my house is cool, but I've basically been only in it for 2 years, except for doctor's visits and a couple of like trips to parks every now and then, grocery stores close by and stuff. For about 2 years now, I've basically. It's too bad I hadn't committed a crime because I've basically been under house arrest for 2 years essentially, and I'm trying to restore and get some of that life back. Um, but not everyone's going to be so quote unquote lucky. And me just telling you is it because I can't hold you accountable in any way. I don't know whether some sort of intervention would, but also just the knowledge is, just as we see with the opioid epidemic, it won't matter telling you if you don't have a support system that is there to help you. It won't matter shaming you if you don't have a support system of people you want to live not just longer for, but healthier for. And that you don't open up to them about that's a goal of yours and you need their help to stay accountable. Because just like your friends can be douches when you're done drinking, where it's like, yeah, I know you're not really drinking, but like, what about this one party or whatever? Like, sorry, we just won't invite you to things anymore. When you have the actual healthy friends who are like, we will go out of our way to make sure that we're taking care of you here because we love you. When you have that kind of relationship with people, that is the difference between whether or not people break addictions, whether or not people stop drinking, or not. And so I believe it's not going to be under Trump, especially with RFK Jr., who I think he wants to stop GLP-1 drugs. Whoever it has to be, something has to change. And if the politicians really serve the people, certainly keeping alive should be the number one thing. And right now there is the equivalent of a cure for cancer being held away, only given away when an insurance company has to pay for it because you actually have the coverage. So we have to pay for it, and we've recognized that paying for this treatment for cancer, again, this is a metaphor, not literally cancer, but paying for this treatment for cancer will cost us less than the care for like the complications from the cancer. That's right now who is actually getting their GLP-1 drugs paid for. You have to already be a type 2 diabetic in most cases. Most insurances otherwise will not cover it. It costs $5 to produce a month's worth. And it's like $1,500 to buy it outright. There are some compounding pharmacies that are doing it. Technically, they're not supposed to be. How they're getting this drug, it's not entirely clear. There's a lot about it that's weird, okay? But I'm very, very hopeful and here to take the risk of being, canceled again. So, it's like, fine. I'm used to it. For what will be construed by some people as fat shaming. But I don't really care because it's on the right side of things. And the fact of the matter is when those drugs are massively available or these therapeutics are massively available, because we've already seen this true in just places where they're more available, it is very interesting how the tune changes from people of like inside, outside, what you physically look like, beautiful on any side, all that fine. That doesn't matter. That's not the stuff that matters. You're going to die. And if you're the one who's like, you don't know about my health. Actually, did you know this person was at this weight? Fine, then it doesn't apply to them. But arguing back and fighting back against that shit is harming so many people. If you try to fully summarize that as if you are dealing with obesity and that is complicating your health, if your blood is coming back with bad cholesterol, with bad blood sugars, bad A1Cs, bad blood pressure, it is going to shorten your life possibly dramatically. And it is, as you already know, worsening your life. And so I hope one of the things we are going to consider in the future, Medicare for all, obviously, but in the short term, something to punish in a way that forces them to uh, release this drug to the public or allow generics to be created or something has to happen, because people will die and they don't care. Literally, if they would just make the price fair, millions of less people would die. But if they make it less fair, they'll make less money. So guess which one they're doing?